So very simply, just going through the basics of what the standard customer for Progressive uses inventory management for, which is basically by doing planning lines. Most often they will purchase to a project. Once they have connected the budget to the planning lines, then they can create the purchase orders. So basically what you do is that you have your project budget that you created. We can have a look at that. And the reason why most customers do this is because they have so many project-specific items that they purchase against, and it's not very common actually that they would have in-stock items that they would use in a project. Recently started having a couple more customers that does that, so we're gonna go into what that means in Progressives, but basically most of our customers, they will just be saying, okay, I need something. And they will create the budget for that, and then they will pull that into planning lines and basically creating some POs from that. So let's see if we can just quickly look at that process. So the process so far is the same, regardless if you are purchasing it to the project or signing or reserving product to the project. So far, it's the same. You need to kind of create a budget for that, right? So you go in here and you use the matrix or the budget journal, you read in your demand to the project, and if you would like to use the planning lines, which we recommend that they do, then you get this kind of direct connection between the project and the inventory management flow. Of course, you can just create an independent PO, and of course manually applying what project and what task that belongs to there. It could work also, but you don't get that kind of control from the project. You just need to know. I think that you would be able to here kind of see the purchase order and invoices that are connected to the project that way, but then it's the whole manual process of applying those project number and task number manually. So really up to the customer how their process would like to look, but basically you create your demand and then you do the update to planning lines, which is just let's see, I want to do this one, and you just copy and update project lines, and what it does is that it creates a planning lines. And you can actually see that here. This is the planning lines. So every other lines that doesn't have that means that I haven't any planning lines for those, which is fine because those are resource hour and I'm not really interested in having those at planning lines. Once you are in the planning lines, you have two options, right? Either you generate a PO or sales order. And still, that's where things get a little bit different depending on how the process is. So if you were to purchase against the project, of course you would generate the PO, and the rest of the accounts payable process is standard. There's nothing really unique about it. What is unique is when you decide to consume the product to your project. When you create that consumption, most of the client, if they use purchase against the project, they will then decide that either when they are receiving the product in the PO or when they are invoicing the PO, that's when the consumptions are created in the project. But if you use in-stock item, that's where things get a little bit different. And let's go back one step and go to our project settings. So when you are using in-stock items, what you need to do is instead of creating a purchase order, you will need to generate a sales order. And then you need to decide, okay, if you're going to use sales order, how will the usage be created in your project? You need to decide what happens with the sales order. Again, what step will create a sales transaction? If I check this box, which means that I will generate a usage entries whenever I ship the items out to the customer. That will generate, all the standard project ledger entries and the item ledger entries and all the GL entries that related to that. You can also decide that, okay, I don't want to create the usage based on shipment. I want to do that based on sales invoicing. So, and then that's the question, well, will the customer invoice directly on the sales order, or would they do that in the project? Most likely they would do that in the project. And let's go back to planning lines. Let's see, I have my items there. Okay, so this item actually basically reserve it. And it's very simply, let's see where I have my reservation button. There. I'm just going to create a reservation on that, and then I can choose which of the transaction I want to create. I want to choose one of the item ledger entries to reserve this. That will create my reservation. Here you have your quantity, original quantity on your budget, and then you reserve two, and that means that you have successfully reserved the items. But actually what I wanted to quickly show you was, I think this is pretty nice. Yeah, so you have a color that you can actually see the reservation on that, which is good. Then you can actually dig deeper into that and see what is it that I have reserved. I need to reserve perhaps more or less. or have I reserved all the items, or it is only one items here, maybe I should have reserved more. So it's pretty good. It's for project managers purpose, it's always good to know, okay, what items do I have on this task and have this been reserved or not? And you can see, yeah. And then it's just a matter of really working with this, generating a sales order from this so you can handle the shipments. So that's great. Let's see, and then process the action. Yeah, so basically you decide which action you want to take. Most often it's create, update, or delete. In this case, this is a new line, so let's process this and it will generate a SO for you. Basically here it's the same, right? You ship the items, you create, well, if you want to do the pick, you can do that, but basically you can just decide if you want to ship the item, and then it will then, let's ship it and then look at the transactions. Let's see. So you get your GL entries, item ledger entries, and the project entries, which is really important that we get all of these. And then let's double check that it has run the, yeah, let's pick from the inventory, and yeah. So that's basically it. I think that what I found very, very interesting is the demand overview. I don't know if the warehouse staff is actually in BC or if they are, using another system or however they communicate with each other. But if they would be in BC, it would actually be pretty interesting because then they can actually follow up on the demands on the project itself. Let's calculate this. I find this to be quite, if the inventory is correct in BC, then this is actually quite a nice tool to see. Maybe the screen is too small, but yeah, per item you can actually see the demand of that in each project. And then this date here is actually the date that you budget in the project. So it's pretty good for planning purposes that if you budget on items that you would do that on those days that you actually will need that in order to have the warehouse improve the planning. So this is all of I could do filter to filter out specific project, but let's see. Yeah. And you can also, of course, filter on items if there's a specific item that you need to kind of follow up. So I think this view is pretty nice. I do see that you can pull this out in Excel. It doesn't look good in Excel, but I don't know, maybe you can do some nice reporting on this if you're using any reporting tools. But I think this is pretty good. It's pretty accurate. So yeah, that's what I would look into, looking at the demand, reservations, and you can actually see the reservation here, I believe. You can see if you have reserved the items or not in this. And of course, they will probably want to reserve the items on the item ledgers.